Hello, herro, it's Meg, and today I want to talk to you guys about how getting diagnosed with ADHD has helped me understand myself more and appreciate myself more. This is definitely a personal video, and I debated a lot if I wanted to put this on the internet or not, but ultimately I decided I wanted to make this video because I want to help people who are in a similar situation as I was in, people who, are wondering if they have ADHD or are struggling through life with ADHD without knowing it. And so I'm hoping that by sharing my story, I can help others, get a diagnosis or, figure out what's going on in their life. And if you don't have ADHD and you're watching this video, you can skip it, but you can also stick around for the stories. Up to you. I also do want to disclaim that I am not an expert or a psychiatrist or a psychologist in any way, so this is just me speaking from my personal experience. And I do my best to share accurate information, but if you find anything wrong or something incorrect that I say, feel free to comment down below and let me know, and let the other viewers know as well. I just want this to be a conversation starter, if anything. So yeah, that's all I have to disclaim. I'll break this video down into 3 parts. 1, the background before I got my diagnosis. 2, how I got to being diagnosed. And 3, what changed after my diagnosis. I'll make sure to leave the timestamps down below, and there should be chapters on this video, so if you want to skip around, feel free. We have a lot to cover, so let's get into it. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm currently 22 and I recently got diagnosed with ADHD at the beginning of this year, right when I turned 22. So it's a relatively late diagnosis as far as diagnoses goes, but I think it's becoming more common now for people to discover that they have ADHD at a much later year in their life, because I think most commonly it's diagnosed when you're like really young or in your teen years. So that was not my experience. I got diagnosed in my 20s. So I guess the lesson here is that it's never too late. In my middle and high school years, I've definitely had moments where I've wondered if I have ADHD, just because I was having trouble focusing, sitting still, stuff like that. But I always brushed it off because I didn't look like I was struggling. The people around me, when I would kind of mention it sometimes, being like, I kind of feel like I might have ADHD, they'll be like, oh no, you're just having a bad day, because it was not apparent that I was struggling. I was a very good student in middle and high school. I had good grades, so it was really not a problem, or it seemed like it was not a problem to anyone. And because everybody else thought that way, I also thought that way too, because I had no benchmark to compare it to. And that goes for everyone, like nobody knows how other people think. So I thought that was normal. I thought that was how things were. So I never got diagnosed or never sought help, because it wasn't very apparent that I was having an issue. To give an example of moments where I felt like I had ADHD, I had this paper in my senior year of high school that I just needed to complete, and I just could not bring myself to do it. It was not because it was difficult. It was not a difficult paper to write. I just needed to write it, but I just could not bring myself to do it because I was just feeling this kind of mental block and just feeling really unmotivated and really stuck. It really was like a mental block where I just couldn't do the task, even though it was such a simple task. And I really beat myself up for it. I was like, why can't you do this? Like everybody else can do it. It's, a simple task. It's not because it's very difficult that I can't do it. It's just because I can't concentrate on it. And it was really hard to go through that as a high schooler. And something that I later learned was not normal to other people, because I thought other people had these moments as well, but at the frequency that I was having it, it's not normal. It wasn't until I started university that I started to wonder if I actually had ADHD, seriously consider it. So how I got to being diagnosed, right? When I got to university, 2 things happened. 1, my inability to focus and sit still got worse. and 2, I met other people with ADHD. So starting with my first point, university lectures and assignments really put me through the ringer when it came to sitting still and focusing. Because lectures were long, I had to sit still for a longer period of time, and there was less like moving about. It was rough. My ability to sit still was non-existent. It was so hard to just sit through class, and I could bring myself to do it, but it just took so much energy that after a full day of lectures, like I couldn't do any of my assignments because I was so tired from using extra energy to sit still for that long. And, I was like, that doesn't seem normal. Other people seem to be tired, but not this tired, So I was like, something wrong there maybe. And the other thing was assignments. Because these assignments weren't just one-day assignments, they were usually like assigned for like the entire week. These were long assignments, and my quick wits was no longer enough to fill in the focus gaps that I would have once in a while, where I wouldn't be able to do any work because I could not focus on anything. So when that happened, usually in high school and middle school, I would be able to kind of make up for it with being able to absorb information quickly, but that was no longer enough in university. That was also difficult. And this is when I realized that this wasn't true for everybody and that there was something else going on with me. And so this is where I was like, okay, something needs to change. And this brings me to my second point, which is I met a lot of people with ADHD, and this could not have come at a better time because this was right about the time when I was starting to, feel like something was wrong with me, something deeper was going on than just me being tired. And so, being able to meet people at that time who openly talked about ADHD and their experience with ADHD, that was such a breath of fresh air for me. Because mental health is so stigmatized in Japan. I didn't realize that ADHD was so common and also something that was okay to talk about openly. It's more hush-hush, like every mental health thing is hush-hush in Japanese culture. And so I didn't realize that it was so common to have ADHD, first of all, that I had 3 or 4 friends who were like, yeah, I have ADHD. And I was like, wow, this is very normal. This is not, people don't treat you like you're sick. It's just ADHD. It's like a hair color or something. You were born with black hair, cool. You don't think twice about that. You have ADHD. Don't think twice about that. Well, okay, cool. And that was so refreshing to me because I just never experienced that. So yeah, it was such a breath of fresh air to talk to these people. And after talking to them, I was like, some of the things that they're talking about in terms of experiences sounds like me, sounds like things that I'm struggling with. And that's when I started to connect the dots to be like, maybe the reason I'm struggling so much is because I have ADHD. Actually have ADHD. And just because of the timing of the matter, with things just getting so hard for me university-wise, not being able to focus and sit still really undermined my ability to do well in university. And meeting people who had ADHD, who shared similar experiences to me at the time that I was like, oh my gosh, I need to do something, was, really serendipitous, because that's when I finally decided that I was going to seek out a psychiatrist to try and get a diagnosis for my ADHD. So obviously I went to the psychiatrist, was diagnosed with ADHD as expected, and that's really when things started to look up for me. There was a lot of things that changed after my ADHD diagnosis, but the biggest change was actually not in my ability to focus or sit still. It was in my mindset and my mentality. For years, I had been so hard on myself for having these focus gaps and not being able to sit still because it was something that everybody else could do. And it was it really felt like my fault whenever I would get these focus gaps, especially because, you know, maybe I wasn't taking care of myself, or maybe, you know, I just could not logically explain it. And I'm a very logical person. So like I just didn't understand it. It was so confusing to me because I have energy, I have assignment, energy, use for assignment, but I just couldn't do this. And everybody else could do it, so why couldn't I? Like there was no logical explanation as to why I couldn't do some of these things. And it was frustrating and confusing, and I beat myself up about it for years and years and years. And so learning that my inability to focus didn't come from me being lazy or being not good enough. It just came from the fact that I'm neurodiverse and I have ADHD. Like that really helped me to be less critical of myself, because now I understood why I couldn't apply the energy that I had to do the assignment. It was because it was not stimulating enough, you know? Like it wasn't because I was being picky or lazy or, you know, like all of these negative things that I had associated with myself just because I could not focus whenever I wanted to. I was not any of those things actually, because it's just how my brain is wired. It's not really in my control, you know? So that was really helpful, and that was a really positive change that I saw in myself, the whole being less critical of myself. And it's really been good. Like it feels like I can finally breathe and be more forgiving and more self-compassionate. Feels good. So now, instead of beating myself up for the things I couldn't do, I try to look at it as, you know, an accomplishment instead. The fact that I made it this far without the help that I needed is a feat in itself. And, you know, that might sound kind of conceited, but like it really was an accomplishment that I was able to keep up such good grades and be such a good student with my ADHD and it, you know, being undiagnosed. And so instead of looking at myself bitterly and being like, oh, why couldn't I do those things? I'm trying to like redefine, you know, those memories and be like, no, Meg, actually, the fact that you made it this far is something to be proud of. And that's also been really good for me. You know, it's still a work in progress, but getting my diagnosis and starting to understand what it means has definitely been a huge game changer for me. And so if you're like me and you suspect that you have ADHD, even if nobody else can see it, take an online quiz, or, you know, talk to people you know that have ADHD, talk to them about their experiences, and, you know, try to figure out if, you know, you're just having a bad day or you're just having a different issue, or if you have ADHD, because I think it's worth looking into if you have a slight inkling that you might have ADHD, especially if you're, you know, in the Asian countries where mental health and learning disabilities and stuff like that are so stigmatized. I encourage you to like seek out resources and stuff like that on your own if you feel like you're struggling and you feel like, you know, maybe you need help. Because even though nobody else could see it in me until I got to university, I had feelings of maybe I have ADHD, and I just wish I had the resources and the mental capacity to like look for resources. So I hope that I could be some kind of a resource to you guys, and I'll, you know, link the ADHD, like free ADHD tests that I took when I was like, do I have ADHD? I took several. I'll link those down below. Obviously those aren't a diagnosis. It doesn't mean that you have ADHD or you don't have ADHD, but it's a good place to start if you're, you know, curious and feeling like you need a little bit more guidance. So links to that down below. And at the end of the day, if you look into these resources and you don't end up having ADHD, you don't actually lose anything. You just learn a little bit more about yourself. So I don't think it really hurts if you have a little bit of a curiosity a little bit of a curiosity. That's disgusting. A little suspicion, let's say. A little suspicion. But yeah, that's it for today. It was a very different kind of video. It was very personal, but I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I hope it was helpful. If, you know, there was anything you learned or want to share with me, just let me know in the comments down below. I just hope that this could be a conversation starter or something that kind of gets your mind going, if it were. I just hope I was able to contribute in a helpful way. But yeah, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. If you're new here, consider subscribing for more content like this, and leave a like if you like this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!